Well, friends, thanks once again for sticking with us for this second hour, especially after a kind of heavy sermon. But it's been a heavy couple of weeks around here. But I'm really, really glad that all of you are here. I'm really, really glad that all of you are willing to hear from Gregg Carlson once again. Gregg, as you remember, has been joining us for the last year and a half now as a part of Convergence, guiding our community in conversations about who we are and how we would like to envision our future, where we are going. And he's been with us for, I think, 2 times now, and this is the 3rd time. And so this is the culmination of many of those conversations, and we're really, really grateful that Gregg could be with us. So Gregg, I want to just turn it over to you. I want to say thank you once again for your wisdom, for your leadership, for your really careful and discerning listening presence.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for that, and I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great.
Glad to have you here.
I'm going to steal this mic right off, please. Well, good morning. Steve's opening of his sermon brought back a memory to me of being in Scotland as a college student, and we had gone over to the Isle of Skye, if you've ever been there. In 1978, there was no bridge between Scotland and Skye. You had to take the ferry over, and we got there and we were told that we needed to see this marvelous boat trip that would see puffins and various things that was on the other side of the island. And the only way over there was either to take the mail truck, which would take you there, but then you had to walk the 8 miles back, or to rent a bicycle and take it over. And I chose the bicycle. Some of my friends chose to walk, but I remember that we got there. It was starting to rain. It was rather foggy. We didn't really see any puffins. We just got seasick on this little boat, and got back to where the boat had picked us up. And I got on my bicycle, and my friends were looking at me like, "You got any more room on that bicycle?" Like, because I managed to get back to the town, to the pub, about 20 minutes before it closed, and they did not. So it brought back to me memories of, sometimes you have to really pedal fast when you need to go where you're going. So I'm going to try to pedal fast this morning, folks, so please follow me. This is my 3rd time being here with you. It was interesting reading in the bulletin today that you are 91% of your goal of $600, and I don't have the exact number, of $600,000+ for your annual pledge campaign. I remember that I had been in conversation with Bob and with Jim Maskelet and others for about 6 months, and then you got to the end of your year and you got your pledges, and Bob came out and said, "We didn't make $600,000 this year. We'd hoped to. We didn't make it." And the budget had come in as a bit of a deficit, which is made up in other ways. And the main reason that you all brought me here was 2 things. One was this continued concern about the financial sustainability of the church, and the fact that they felt they were getting, that maybe your church was aging out. Well, I learned a couple things from you all, and I want to share them with you, which I think should be good news to you, but also news that you need to hear. So since that time, I understood that last year, which was the culmination of about the first 6-8 months I was working with you, you not only finished with the budget not in deficit, but in a surplus, and that you had people for the first time in years had come forward to take pledging over $600,000, this year again over $600,000, and you came with another surplus at the end of the year. So to me, what it said is, once you folks started realizing the importance, since we started focusing on helping you realize the good things that are happening in this church, people responded. And I always believe if you tell a good story, people will support it. And I think you have a good story here. I think you have good leadership. You do a lot of wonderful things. I've had a few people say, "Oh, if our building, it feels at times like it's awfully worn, people are coming through." I said, "I go to wonderful museums of churches that no one comes to, and no one does anything in them. They're not doing what God called them to do. They're simply trying to preserve a piece of property. You are using what God has given you for great things, and I want to encourage you today about that." When I came and visited the first time, what I observed was that unlike, it was kind of almost a little bit hidden message, though you're seeing it more and more, I think, on Sunday morning. You have a growing children's and youth program and the families that support it. But the thing that's different for many of us who are of my generation is that those families have so many needs going on, so many things that cause their time, that you don't see them every Sunday morning. They're here maybe once a month, and they feel, because of all the different competing things of their life, that they are regular attenders and members of your church. And we have to reorganize how we keep statistics to understand the number of people that are part of your church is much greater than what you might even see on Sunday morning, okay? That's a difference going on. And those younger people, and we talked a little bit with the staff and some of the leaders this week, I'm learning a lot about generations lately. I don't know how many of you are thinking about it, but right now in our world, in our country specifically, there are more generations alive than in any time in history. Some of you are older than the baby boomers who are here today. Your generation is, I think they still call it the silent generation, I'm not sure. But then you had the boomer generation. I mean, we were a mess because we were like the big pig and the snake. You know, we've come in and we've demanded all kinds of things and we've run all kinds of things. And now we're moving into retirement. There's just a few boomers left who are still working, and many of us are moving towards retirement, or we should be retired, but we're still working beyond that. But we have amassed more wealth and more property and various things than any generation before us did and a generation after us did. And so in our churches today, one of the great concerns I have is when I look at the fact that Generation X, which is now about 57, 59, 60 as the top end, and that goes back down. I have a son-in-law who's in that age group. They're half the size of the boomer generation. Numbers-wise, half the size. And then the next generation, the millennials, you know, we used to think of those young kids running around. I have two daughters who are 46, who are at the top edge of that millennial generation. And you know what I've noticed is it took them a long time to get the really good jobs. They struggled through a lot of things, and they paid a lot of student loans and various things, and they raised kids, and now they're starting to get there. And then we have the next generation after that, which we think of as the Zs. I have two granddaughters now. Both of them have gotten through college, and they're kind of running out into the world. But their way of looking at things is so different. And I think the challenge we have before us is to realize that, number one, what this church does and what this church has been is very important for it to continue on for many years. Very important. But we may not be able to depend upon the generations beneath us to step in immediately because they don't have the same capacities that our generation has had. So we need to be aware of that as we move forward. I'll be talking about that today, but I'm encouraged that you really are reaching another generation. You just don't always see them every Sunday morning, but they are here and they're doing great things. I think that the one thing that came out of our studies was communications. That a church today can't depend on the old ways of if we build it, they will come, or if we print out a weekly bulletin, that's all we need to do. Communication begins in this way. It's still true. If you invite your neighbor or you invite a new friend that you've come to be and you say, come to church with me, there's a good chance that they might come to church with you one time. They might visit. We used to say it's like 80% might come if you visit, if you invite them personally, if you've made friends with them. Not that you've just gone into the supermarket and say, well, come to church with me, but you've actually got to know them and they trust you. But almost exclusively, every new person that will come to your church, before they ever walk through the door, they're going to look to see what your website says about you. They're going to look to see what Facebook or X or other social media says about you because they want to know you're a safe place. They want to know that you're a place that meets the values that they have, that they're coming to. And so communications is crucial. And so John Kiker and his team have been working on developing a new website and talking about how to reinvigorate your social media as you move forward. And I think that's an important part of that. We also felt that one of the things I've seen in many churches, because some of you know, before I was a consultant, I was an executive pastor in several large churches. And one of my jobs was to make sure, how do we get people who visit us the first time to become active participants in our church? And so we've talked about how do we move people from the time they first visit us to actually being very involved in the congregation. Are we really tracking? Are we really helping them to feel part of the group? And so we talked about that. We also talked about the fact that because there are more people with my kind of hair, my Bernie Sanders haircut, you need more pastoral care. But it's not something that the ministers can do all of that. But there are other ways of delivering pastoral care, and we talked about how do we begin to build stronger pastoral care for the congregation. The other two things left there, one was we used to think that churches, like an old line meeting house, people came to the church because they could walk there. When this church was founded in 1665, no one drove to church. Okay? They walked to church. Now, you have people who are a part of this church, who come to this church, who watch on your YouTube feed, who live 40, 50, 60 miles away from your church. They come here because of the values and because of the message and because of the work that your church is doing in the world. They come because they want to hear the message of your pastor. They come because they think that you are a bright and shining light in a world where there's lots of not very shining lights. And so how do we begin to meet those needs? I watched, some of you may be aware of this church, Middle Collegiate Church in New York City, which is a UCC-affiliated congregation. About 7-8 years ago, it burned to the ground. Right about the time of COVID, just before that, burned to the ground. And their pastor, Jackie Lewis, who is a lightning ball all by herself, began to see how do we continue to build this congregation. And now, after COVID, they've actually now rebuilt the church. They were now meeting in the church again. They were a small congregation before COVID. They were maybe a couple hundred people. They're probably smaller than you folks. But she began using the internet, and they built congregations of followers in major cities all over the United States. And now Middle Collegiate Church represents thousands of people. You know, it's a different way of church, and you have to realize people are looking for it because what it was Jackie promoted a sense of value and purpose and a way of following Jesus that was so very important. I think that this church strives as much as possible. I think you heard it even from the pulpit today. You want to be a force of change, not only in Old Lyme, but in all of central Connecticut, in all of this Northeast, in the world. And you, between your outreach efforts in various countries and working in various ministries around here, I was heard from your Board of Missions about how many different organizations in the regional area you support financially, but now you're learning we can't just support them financially. We have to go and help them. We have to go and put people there, make sure that they're able to carry forward, because one of the things which you're all aware of, the kind of public giving to charities, the grants that used to go out to so many organizations have just dried up completely. And churches are having, even in the times that you might say is too tough for us, we have to find ways to become conduits to kind of bring water to dry places. So here's what I would say to you all. Your church today is a healthy church. I tell you, it's probably, among the churches I have seen and worked with over the last 15 years, you rank in that top 10%, top 5% of being a healthy church. But you're also in the midst of two things which are crises that you have to face. One is external. We're in this really difficult time in our country. And I don't want to dwell on those news, but you all know it's a difficult time. And second, you're hovering on a precipice or a threshold where many of you in this room in the next 5 to 10 years may not be here in this room 5 to 10 years. But what are we going to leave behind so that the people who follow you will still be able to be in this room 5 or 10 years from now? It's a time where your church is at a point of saying, where do we go from here? And that's what I think I was brought in to help you see is, where do we go from here? And I think it's really about looking at how do we fund and sustain this ministry. So, oops, we did that one. So we started with a task force a year and a half ago And I did an initial report to you all last time I was here. Cameron Trimble, we did an initial assessment which was given to your congregation. Cameron Trimble, my colleague, came and did 2 adult forums through Zoom. I came and did an in-person consultation where I met with a lot of people and gave another report. We did a second visit here last year in which we had a whole group of people, almost 100 people, come together and did a workshop and worked on looking at futuring type of things. And I also gave a report back to the adult forum at that time. And since then, we've kind of realized that what we had been doing fell into 5 buckets. We didn't have to work on vision and values or mission and values. You have plenty of mission and values. You may have too many, but there was clearly, many people said, we're not cutting back right now. But you have a clear sense of who you are. So what does that mean for next? So we came back to, we focused on 5 areas. So the first one was this. The church needed to have a continuous stewardship plan for operational financial sustainability. I don't know if you've noticed the little easels that are there. Bob's picked up on this. You have to tell the story, and you can't just tell it once a year at stewardship time. You've had people stand up and speak in the church service. You've had people give reports in your newsletters. The church has kept stewardship in front of you all this last year and a half of really what does the church do with this money. There's a great deal of transparency in giving. I wish we had the same transparency in other areas of our lives, but there's been great transparency to see where did the dollars go. Why is the dollars you give make a big difference? Because they really do. And so that has worked. The step-up giving chart that's back there, the monthly Giving Matters column in your newsletter. We're seeing your stewardship team really implement this plan of working on continuous stewardship to get your financial stability in place. That's your operational budget, and that's moving forward well. Second was long-term funding. Now this is where we're still working out a plan, but we had a lot of conversation this week. One is you're going to need to find a way of doing some long-term funding for this church. I firmly believe my mentor, Lyle Schaller, who was, the story was I came to a church in Illinois as an executive pastor, was called, and I didn't really have a clear idea what I was doing, but they trusted me anyways. But the first thing they did was the pastor, as he was walking down the hall, said, there was this gentleman who was about 75, 80 years old at the time, walking towards us. He says, I want to introduce you to Lyle Schaller. And I said, not the Lyle Schaller, because I, as a young pastor, had read the 15 or 16 books he had written on how to run a church, and he did. And every Sunday, after I came to be in that church, he was just kind of he always had a little clipboard with him, and every Sunday he'd come up to me after church and he'd give me about 5 things I could improve on for the next week. He wrote a book called Confessions of a Contrarian. He was a bit of that. And but really, one of the things that he taught me significantly was almost all of you have at least 4 pockets of money in your life. You have one pocket, which is this tithe, this pledge that you give to the church each year. And you give that to other organizations as well, but it's like something you've committed in your budget, you're giving to the operational needs of who you support. The second is, some of these kids, if they're going to do like a sports camp or they're going off on a trip, and they come up and they say, I need to either sell some Girl Scout cookies, or we need to raise a few $100s, and you'll reach in your wallet, and if you've got $20 or $40, you'll pitch it in. It's called impulse giving. You'll give it to them. The third area, though, is what we call a capital gift, and that is where the church has made a case to you of why they need to raise this money. And probably the most obvious one, if many of you have been a part of churches for a long time, the roof is leaking, the furnace stopped working. It's a major thing, we've got to fix it. But there are also other needs that come along. Needs like, how do we fund so that in 5 years we can continue to do the kind of giving to nonprofits that we're doing now? Or look at ways we can ensure that as this generation ages out, that there is more interest in the endowment fund that can help fund the operational budget going forward. Or there's money to do some of the updates, which I know you all see a little bit here or there that have been kind of deferred because the money wasn't there, some deferred maintenance. The church is going to develop a case of why they need to do these things. And you will probably have some input into that as to what it is that you'd want to support. And the way you support that is somebody's going to talk to you and say, we'd like to start a capital campaign and we're thinking it's around this. And you might say, oh, that's a good idea. I would give, but I'm really concerned about this too. And that might add to the case or add to it. But in the next year, this church has got to begin working on a capital campaign because quite frankly, you are all in a place still to make some of this happen. And it's important for that to take place. The second thing that I would say is this. You have a $3 million endowment now. Why? Because people who are older than you, people who are of a previous generation, wanted this place to still be here for you. And they left money in their wills, they left money in their estates to fund this church in the future. And there's going to come a time where you're going to be asked, have you decided to leave this church support? You know, you've taken care of your family, you've taken care of all your needs, and you're now bound for the next journey with wherever God is taking us. But what you leave behind, is it going to be some of it left behind for this church? It's going to be important to do that. And so the Spire Society, which you guys all established a number of years ago, it needs to be reinvigorated. It needs to be talked about more. And you have in your church wonderful people who are accountants and lawyers who can help you if you don't have the best, if you want more questions about how that would work in your life, the church is going to work on that. This talk about how do we integrate people. You have wonderful deacons. You know that a deacon, if you go back to the book of Acts, were people that were empowered by the ministers to do the work of Christ in the community, to care for the sick, the elderly, and the children, or the new people coming in, the new converts coming in. Your deacons, in the conversations I've had with your leaders and deacons, are beginning to realize that's going to be crucial for you. Some of your deacons are already thinking about, how do I greet that new person coming in the back door, get their name, their information, and help the ministers move that person toward becoming part of the congregation. Because you're getting a lot of people, you don't have a problem drawing visitors. You really are getting a lot of people that visit for the first time. But how are we helping those people move toward becoming members? It was interesting to me, Bob told me that there were 38 new pledges this year from people who aren't members. In other words, there are people who've been coming to church here they realize you're doing great work, but they haven't really been invited more deeply into the congregation. And so working at how do we get that process going forward, the deacon's going to be working on that strategy. I think it's going to be important. The second area is looking at the other end, if you want to. Because of the congregation's age and things, you have more people who aren't able to come to church as often or at all because of health needs. You have people who are at home who are vital members of this congregation who are caring for spouses who aren't able to come. The pastors don't have the time to spend everything to do all of that because of all the things running this church. But the deacons can begin to go out to people, carry communion to people, visit with people, be the eyes and ears of the pastors to know when there's those crucial times that somebody needs more help. And so I'm hoping the deacons, I've given them probably as much work as anybody this year. Go out there and begin to do that dual work of a deacon. Maybe they're going to come to you and say, we need more deacons. Can you join us? But that's going to be a crucial part of where this goes. Fourth area, communications is going to help, but your church, this is a question we haven't fully addressed as much as we'd like to. The fact that your church is not just a community church, but it's a regional church. And this map shows you how the people who took the survey, and many of those weren't even some of the younger people, they lived quite a distance away from the church. And over 47% live more than 6 miles away. So how do we begin to build community with people who may not live nearby? Fourth area was strategies for improved the communication, which we talked a little bit about earlier. John Kiker and his team is working on developing the new website new looking at social media. That's going to be crucial. You all got to experience Zoom Sunday last week, right? You know, you got to see what a lot of people who are watching your services see. And I'm told that not only are there people watching it live on Sunday morning, but throughout the week people are watching it. I know of churches where they take a wonderful sermon like Steve's and they break it into chunks and they put it in pieces where people, when they go on their morning walk or their morning run or their stop, they can re-listen to part of the sermon. They can't be there for the whole service, but they pick up pieces of it. That's all part of what social media is doing these days. Some of you have probably encountered reels in your Facebook page where you get little snippets of things that try to draw you further in. This church has to work more at helping to tell that great message of what you're doing in those little snippets to get people drawn further in. And John's team is working on that. I came this time for a reason, and it's an important reason. And actually, as I came away from this time, I was impressed with how it's not as urgent as I first thought. You have these staff members who are so young that they're approaching like 85 years of age, which many of you say, well, I retired 25 years ago, but Robert back there is still working away. I mean, it was like... I don't know, you all know this. So I was here all weekend. I was here Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and especially on Saturday. I'm interviewing people and talking away. Bob's in there working on the computer the whole day. I mean, he's like, I love these days because no one's bothering me. I'm just working away. I'm like, Bob, that's not part of your job, you know. But you know, he's here doing that. But between Robert and Colleen, yeah, get that right, Colleen, you've got people who need to be able to begin documenting the work they're doing, and the church needs to begin thinking, okay, if in 20 years when Bob retires, what is the next step for our senior staff? Are we going to keep the same way we've done things, or are there newer ways of thinking about things? And I threw in this idea this weekend of really thinking about what I experienced in my ministry was I'd done some work in business and community organizations before I went into being a pastor. And it was interesting that over the years, those skills got drawn more deeply into the church because I realized quickly on that I didn't want to be a number one senior pastor. I could preach occasionally, I didn't mind speaking, but I really liked supporting what the mission of the church was going to be. And a lot of that was in the business end of the church and the organizing, the personnel, the money, the buildings. And I became what was called an executive pastor in several large churches. And quite frankly, that is a theme happening in many churches of your size and larger these days, that one of the pastoral staff who is integrated into the pastoral staff in terms of knowing what the vision and values of the pastors are, but also is able to manage the business end of the church so that the work flows smoothly. And it may be that as you move toward a time where you're going to be adding new staff, that kind of person might be the kind of person you might consider in that search rather than a traditional associate pastor or person of the team. So that was part of it. I also think this, Jolene has done a great job as a kind of an employee raised up from among you part-time, working with the children and youth. She's now going to Yale in the youth program that they have there. And there is a need that, you know, it's funny how those kids that were third, fourth, and fifth grade just a couple of years ago, all of a sudden they're freshmen and sophomores in high school. And so the need to continue to have a strong youth program is going to be important. It may be that as you build out that children and youth program, you're going to have to add a little more staffing in there. Where that fits in exactly is going to be determined by the personnel committee, but I think that's an area where there's going to be a need for some growth. I just think it's every church that I have watched, when they invest in staffing for youth, they grow. When they cut it back, it gets smaller. It's just a very important thing to realize. So that's an area where I've been working on this weekend, listening to things. Listening not just to staffing in terms of paid staffing, but as we talked about with the deacons, volunteer staffing, you know, more and more churches are really focusing on their volunteer leaders, because their volunteers have skills far greater than they might have had even a few years ago. You're a professional church. You have a lot of people here who've had great experience leading organizations, working in organizations, working for big companies. Lean on those skills. Don't just sit in the pew and lean back and think about, oh, I'm retired now. You've just got more time to give things to this church, and you're doing that well here, so I encourage you all that. So my concluding statement is this. In the time frame of this consultation, our country has gone through tremendous change and challenges. And the needs, especially for progressive congregations, have just gotten greater and greater. And I think the fact that you really understand your mission and your vision is really important. Your mission and values of who you're serving and what you're doing is crucial. But you're also in this time where you can't sit back and just say, well, just do the same old thing and expect the same results. It's time to really be aware that these are crucial years, and I hope that you will pay attention to that as you move forward together. I'm a great fan of Richard Rohr. I know some of you are as well. You know, I've been to New Mexico to his Center for Action and Contemplation. I love the fact that he used action first and then contemplation, but they are tied together. This is a time for action and contemplation of working together in that, and I hope that your church will do that. She'll heed the call of the Spirit as she tells you where God is leading you in these days ahead. And so just figure out what it is God's calling you to do in your own life and do it. Okay? Amen. Questions? Yeah. And do we have a second microphone if they want to, everyone can hear them?
We just pass it around.
Okay. Or just come to the front and take the microphone so others can hear if you have a question. I know that'll discourage questions, but
That's the plan.
can you pass it back to the gentleman back there?
What are the implications? What's the significance of being a regional congregation? What does that really mean, other than we're drawing? I'll repeat. What are the implications? What's the significance? What are the next steps for being a regional community?
Okay, the magic mic.
Yeah. So what it says is that the values and the kind of activities and things that you're doing here are attracting people beyond what they see in their local community. Okay? They may be in a town 20 miles away, but when they look around the churches that are around them, they don't see the same kinds of real change happening that you guys are putting forward here. So the emphasis, the two things that'll happen is, one, to realize they probably can't be here every Sunday. They might be on your YouTube, or at least consuming the YouTube sermon or the service during the week, but they're not likely to be physically showing up in your building. That's good for one step. You're not having to say, oh, let's tear down the meeting house and build bigger. You know, I don't think that's what the world is telling us today. It's saying, how do we reach people who want to become part of our church so we have other opportunities than just a Sunday morning worship service, ways that they can volunteer and do different things, ways that you might even begin to reach out and have regional groups. You might for once a quarter have a gathering of old line people who live in Niantic, or old line people who live in another town, and begin to build little social groups of people who are part of your church who are not there. That's what I see happening with the middle collegiate church. They have I live in northwest Georgia, and for a while I lived in Atlanta during COVID. And now I keep getting emails from middle collegiate to come to gatherings of middle collegiate folks in Atlanta, because they have several hundred people who follow their ministry who live there. Now, that may not be happening so far away here, but there are ways that you're going to have to begin to address the fact that your church is more than just the neighborhood. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Dana. I don't know whether anyone else noticed that 263 people have given to the capital campaign. I think that's a disgrace. How do we even, get people to give $10 just to make it be 100%, not those pitiful few?
I think your stewardship team is working on that. I don't know what the numbers. Bob, do you want to speak to the numbers that of pledges?
She's about right. 279 for the 2025 campaign, 263 so far for this year's campaign. Now those are households, so that's not the number of individuals. We're talking therefore probably about 400 or 450 individuals. But still, it's a smaller percentage of our active members that we have on the rolls than we would like. Having said that, just because our information system says that they're an active member doesn't mean they're really not that active. We only have this one categorization in our information system that says active member or friend. That's it. It doesn't differentiate the grades of activity. So it's a concern of ours because it's been going down slowly over the years, certainly, and that concerns us. A lot of the work you're doing is to help us help us build that more active group. I'd like to see the active members up in the 300 to 350 range.
Yeah, I think it would be great. Part of that process you just said, there are younger families that haven't been brought in further. They're on the fringe. Their kids may come here occasionally, but we've got to find ways to get them more incorporated into the church, and that's one of the goals. Yeah. I just have to say that that's the other thing that we have. We are putting our boomer and the older values on the younger people. How many of us were able to buy homes in our 20s? How many of us did not have 20 years of student loans that we had to pay off, or all the other things that go today? It's a generational issue that we've got to figure out how to get past, because the younger generation is really challenged. It's not that they're less faithful. It's not that they don't care. It's that they're really pressed financially. Many of them are. The things that I read that, only about 20% of people have more than 60 days of funds available if they lost their job. These are crucial times. People are living paycheck to paycheck. So we do have to figure out a way to help people. I actually think when I was executive pastor, I'll just say this, I was in a more of a conservative church when I first started, but there was a program that was called Dave Ramsey, who some of you may know from the radio. He had a program of financial stewardship that he taught in churches that helped young families get out of debt and manage their funds. And I helped a lot of families do that when I was younger, to help get out of debt. And we need more of a progressive understanding of how young families can manage what they have, because quite frankly, the world isn't teaching them that. They don't teach you that in high school. They don't teach you that in college. How do you actually manage this money that you have so that you're not getting yourself into these terrible situations where you're stuck? Yeah.
Question over here.
Oh, good.
I'm just wondering if there's not ways to explore providing some of these services at less expense to the church, less expensive ways to, I don't really have it completely well formed, but it's sort of relative to what we've all been talking about, but different ways that don't require so much capital investment to bring in the regional people and things along those lines. I mean, is that something that you've been looking at?
So let me just say this. I think your church does a very good job of managing finances as best that you can. You deliver a lot of services for a fairly reasonable price. Certainly, if you can improve your communications to people who are not necessarily in the community, both older people and younger people, so they can feel connected to the church even if they can't physically be here, the opportunity then to get funding back from them from that will be a great investment, number one. But number two, we're at a time, and I wish it were not so, 30 years ago, I would say, yeah, we should get more community grants, and let's partner with more nonprofits that have more money than we have. Right now, all those nonprofits are coming to us saying, things have really changed, so that's hard. I don't know, I don't have an answer for that right now, other than vote next fall, okay? Yes.
So who will be providing the initiative and the leadership to make sure that your work doesn't just get put on a shelf?
Well, Robert, number one.
There's
5 more years with Robert, right?
Well, I think there was some discussion whether I should come back around and coach you guys now and then to make sure it goes forward. But I don't want to speak to what the church wants to do. But yes, I think that there's always value in having an outside person keep saying, keep it up, keep going, get it done. But I don't want to necessarily toot my own horn. But I'm just saying that is important to do. It's important for each of you to say, okay, we've had this, we talked about this, are we doing this? Okay, so you all help hold people accountable. And you may help hold people accountable by actually volunteering to help with that, to make sure it happens. Yes?
I guess quite concretely, that meeting here, I think many people in this room have lots of skills that they've gained over many years that could be put to use, and many years of time to put those to use. So who and what do we do next to see how we can be most useful?
I'm not sure everyone heard that.
I'm notoriously the softest speaker in all of Connecticut, I think. But I think that everyone, was I clear enough? Yeah. Okay.
So what you're asking is, how, if each of you have skills, especially if we get new people coming in the door that have skills, we don't know what their skills are, how do we get to know them? Again, two things. One, the new website will have ways of helping we're talking about having a member portal on it so that we can begin to catalog. Right now, 90% of who we know people's gifts and strengths are contained in Bob McCracken's brain and your associate pastor. They know everything, but we've got to move to having it way we can all access that.
You've got to include Jody May.
And Jody, yes, Jody knows to do it. So we've got to move from what has been a very excellent human system to something that transcends that, not AI, but I'm just something that catalogs that, so we're able to, in bigger churches that have done these, if someone's saying, who could help us with this, you push a button in the database and it prints out 5 people who have those skills. That's really what you got to move toward doing. Yeah. I just want to say thank you to Bob and Steve and your pastors and your leaders. Some of you have come and talked to me. Some people said, I just went in there and I talked the whole hour. He didn't say anything to me. Well, you have to know I'm a coach by trade, so I tend to ask questions and listen. So hopefully that you all had a chance, that those of you that got to come, to do that. I'm going to leave some business cards here. If there's questions, you may feel too shy to ask questions, but if you want to email me and give more information, I'd be glad to that. There will be a final report about the staffing program that we're here talking about this weekend, and then that'll be submitted to the personnel and the trustees and anyone else that has to be working on that process with the pastors. But this is the work that I did. This slide series has been given to the church. I don't know if it's been circulated, Bob, or not. It has. It's still available. So if you have questions about what you saw today and you haven't seen it, talk to Bob in the office. They'll get that to you so you can get that. Okay? Thank you all very much.